There are places in America where time has stopped, where entire towns have vanished, leaving nothing but echoes of the past. Fires that never die, streets frozen in time, whispers in the wind. These aren't just ghost stories, they're real. From a town burning for decades to a place cursed by those who dare take a piece of it, these are the creepiest abandoned towns in the U.S. But be warned, once you hear their stories, you may never look at these places the same way again. Centralia, Pennsylvania. The town that burns beneath. Centralia, Pennsylvania, once a bustling coal mining town, now stands as one of the eeriest abandoned places in America. What sets it apart from other ghost towns isn't just its emptiness, but the fact that it has been burning from beneath for over 6 decades. The inferno that still rages underground has transformed it into a wasteland of cracked roads, toxic fumes, and empty houses, making it one of the most surreal and unsettling places in the United States. The town was founded in the mid-19th century, thriving due to its rich coal deposits. By the early 1900s, it had a booming population of over 2,000 people, with stores, churches, and schools serving the community. The coal industry kept the town alive, providing stable jobs and economic prosperity. However, beneath the surface, the same coal that made Centralia thrive would eventually lead to its downfall. The fire that doomed Centralia started in May 1962. A landfill near an abandoned coal strip mine was set on fire in an attempt to clean up waste before Memorial Day. It was a common practice, but this time something went terribly wrong. The fire ignited an exposed coal seam and spread underground into a vast network of mines beneath the town. Efforts to extinguish it failed as the flames found new fuel sources, spreading deeper into the earth. Over time, the underground fire created dangerous conditions, heating the ground, releasing toxic gases, and causing the earth to collapse in unpredictable places. For years, residents carried on, unaware of how serious the problem was. Small warning signs began to emerge, smoke rising from the ground, an odd smell in the air, and patches of hot soil where snow wouldn't settle. But it wasn't until the early 1980s that the crisis became undeniable. In 1981, a 12-year-old boy named Todd Domboski was playing in his grandmother's backyard when the ground suddenly gave way beneath him, opening a sinkhole 150 feet deep. He managed to grab onto exposed tree roots and was pulled to safety, but the event sent a shockwave through the town. Scientists confirmed that carbon monoxide levels were rising and the fire was spreading, making large portions of the town uninhabitable. As the situation worsened, Pennsylvania officials made the difficult decision to relocate the residents. In 1983, the government approved a $42 million plan to buy out homes and businesses. Most people accepted the offer and left, their houses demolished soon after. By the early 1990s, Centralia had transformed from a lively town into a desolate wasteland. Buildings were torn down, and streets became overgrown with weeds. The only signs of life were the occasional visitors drawn to the town's eerie landscape. Perhaps the most famous remnant of Centralia is the abandoned stretch of Highway 61, often called Graffiti Highway. The road, once a main route, became unstable due to the underground fire, causing it to crack and split apart. Over the years, visitors covered the ruined pavement in graffiti, turning it into an eerie, colorful monument to the lost town. However, in 2020, the state of Pennsylvania, concerned about trespassers, buried the highway under dirt to discourage further visits. Despite the government buyout, a handful of residents refused to leave. In 2013, the state reached a legal agreement allowing the remaining few to stay until their deaths, after which their properties would revert to the government. As of today, fewer than 5 people still live in Centralia, surrounded by abandoned streets and the ever-present risk of the underground fire. While Centralia itself is nearly empty, the legends surrounding it continue to grow, Many believe the town is haunted, with some visitors reporting strange noises, shadowy figures, and an overwhelming sense of unease. The constant smoke and sulfurous smell add to its ominous atmosphere. Some even speculate that the town inspired the horror film Silent Hill, though the filmmakers have never confirmed this. Despite its eerie reputation, Centralia remains a place of fascination. Tourists and urban explorers still make their way to the nearly empty town, eager to witness the effects of an underground fire that has burned for more than 60 years. Scientists predict that the fire could continue for another 250 years, meaning Centralia will likely remain abandoned and uninhabitable for generations to come. Today, if you visit Centralia, you will find a few crumbling sidewalks leading to nowhere, empty lots overtaken by nature, and the occasional wisp of smoke rising from the ground. Street signs still mark roads that no longer lead to homes, and old cemeteries serve as a haunting reminder of the town's past. The eerie silence is only broken by the occasional crackling of the ground beneath, a chilling reminder that Centralia is still burning. Bodie, California, the ghost town frozen in time. Nestled in the desolate hills near the Sierra Nevada, Bodie, California, stands as one of the most well-preserved ghost towns in America. Once a booming gold rush town teeming with fortune seekers, saloons, and outlaws, Bodie now exists in a state of eerie suspension, its buildings, belongings, and even furniture left behind, as if the residents had vanished overnight. The silence that fills its empty streets is unsettling, broken only by the howling wind that sweeps through the abandoned town. Bodie was founded in 1859 after a prospector named W.S. Bodie discovered gold in the area. Though he tragically died in a snowstorm before seeing the town thrive, his name lived on. By the late 1870s, Bodie was in the midst of a gold mining boom, attracting thousands of people eager to strike it rich. With more than 60 saloons, brothels, opium dens, and gambling halls, Bodie became notorious for its lawlessness. Gunfights were common, and the streets often ran with blood as rival miners, bandits, and drunkards settled disputes with bullets. Despite its rough reputation, Bodie was a town of opportunity. The mines were producing millions of dollars in gold and silver, drawing merchants, blacksmiths, teachers, and families. By 1880, Bodie had nearly 10,000 residents, a church, a school, and even a Chinatown district. At its peak, it was a vibrant town, bustling with stagecoaches, horses, and the clanking of pickaxes in the mines. But prosperity was fleeting. As quickly as Bodie rose, it began to fall. By the late 1880s, the gold veins started to deplete, and miners left in search of more promising claims. Businesses shuttered, and crime increased as desperation set in. A series of fires ravaged parts of the town, but it was the economic collapse that truly sealed its fate. By the early 1900s, only a few hundred residents remained, stubbornly clinging to the hope that the mines would yield riches again. The final blow came during the Great Depression, when mining became unprofitable, forcing the last residents to abandon the town entirely. What makes Bodie so eerie today is how perfectly preserved it remains. Unlike many ghost towns where buildings crumble and nature reclaims the land, Bodie has been maintained in a state of arrested decay. This means that while the structures are protected from further collapse, they are left exactly as they were when the town was deserted. Peering through the windows of homes, you'll see tables still set with dishes, chairs pulled back as if someone had just stood up, and beds covered in dust but left perfectly made. The schoolhouse still contains desks with books left open, and the general store's shelves remain stocked with goods, untouched for nearly a century. Adding to its eerie reputation is the legend of the Bodie curse. Visitors who take even the smallest object, be it a rock, a nail, or a piece of glass, report experiencing streaks of bad luck. Park rangers frequently receive letters from remorseful tourists who mail back stolen items, often with apologies detailing misfortunes such as financial ruin, car accidents, or personal tragedies. Whether the curse is real or just superstition, many don't take the risk. Today, Bodie is a designated state historic park, drawing thousands of visitors who walk its empty streets, gazing at the remains of a once thriving town. The abandoned buildings and eerie silence create an unsettling atmosphere, as if the ghosts of Bodie's past still linger. As the sun sets and long shadows stretch across the town, it's easy to imagine the echo of footsteps, the distant sound of laughter in the saloons, and the whispers of a time long gone. The question remains, was Bodie truly abandoned, or does it still hold on to the spirits of its past? Glenrio, Texas, New Mexico, the forgotten town on Route 66. Straddling the border between Texas and New Mexico, Glenrio was once a lively stop along the legendary Route 66, a town where weary travelers could refuel, grab a bite to eat, and rest before continuing their journey. It was a place where the neon lights of gas stations and motels glowed in the desert night, and the sounds of laughter and jukebox music filled the roadside diners. But today, Glenrio is nothing more than a ghost town, a collection of crumbling buildings, rusting signs, and empty highways where the echoes of the past still linger. Glenrio began as a railroad town in the early 1900s, but it wasn't until Route 66 was established in 1926 that it truly flourished. Sitting right on the Texas-New Mexico state line, it became a natural stopping point for travelers. The town quickly grew, with service stations, cafes, motels, and auto repair shops springing up to accommodate the steady flow of visitors. Because Glenrio sat on the border, it had an unusual quirk. Texas laws prohibited alcohol sales, so bars and liquor stores were built on the New Mexico side while Texas had gas stations and diners. This created a unique setup where travelers could fuel up on one side of town and grab a drink on the other, all within a short walk. For decades, Glenrio thrived as part of the golden age of Route 66. The town was featured in travel guides and postcards, boasting the famous Glenrio Motel and the Little Juarez Cafe. At its peak, it was a bustling roadside community, a small but essential piece of America's highway culture. But its fate changed in the 1970s, when progress rendered it obsolete. The end of Glenrio came swiftly when Interstate 40 was built, bypassing the town entirely. No longer a necessary stop for travelers, Glenrio's businesses began to shut down one by one. The once busy motels stood empty, their neon signs flickering before going dark for good. The gas stations closed, their pumps gathering dust. With no customers, residents had no reason to stay, and one by one they left, leaving behind homes, businesses, and memories. By the 1980s, Glenrio was a ghost town. What makes Glenrio so eerie today is how untouched it remains. Walking through the town feels like stepping into a time capsule from the 1950s and 60s. The skeletal remains of gas stations, their old pumps rusting under the sun, stand as silent reminders of the town's past life. The abandoned motels still have their vacancy signs, though no guests have checked in for decades. The Little Juarez Cafe, once filled with travelers enjoying a hot meal, now sits in silence, its sign fading and its doors forever closed. The highway, once busy with road-tripping families and truckers, is eerily quiet, with only the occasional tumbleweed rolling by. Unlike many ghost towns, Glenrio has no dramatic disaster or tragic event tied to its abandonment. It wasn't destroyed by fire, flood, or economic collapse. It simply faded away, left behind by time and progress. This slow, quiet death makes it all the more haunting. It was once a town full of life, thriving off the energy of America's most famous road, but now it stands frozen in decay, a relic of a bygone era. Despite its abandonment, Glenrio continues to attract visitors, ghost town explorers, Route 66 enthusiasts, and photographers seeking to capture its eerie beauty. But there is an undeniable sense of loneliness in the air. The wind whispers through the broken windows, and the cracked pavement tells the story of a town that was left behind, waiting for travelers who will never come again. At night, under the vast desert sky, Glenrio feels even more desolate, its neon dreams long extinguished, its fate sealed by the relentless march of time. Kennecott, Alaska. The frozen remains of a copper empire. Deep in the remote wilderness of Alaska, nestled between towering glaciers and rugged mountains, stands Kennecott, a once thriving copper mining town that now lies eerily abandoned. Time has stood still in this forgotten place, where massive red buildings cling to the mountainside, their weathered wood groaning against the cold wind. Rusting machinery, empty houses, and crumbling railroad tracks remain as haunting reminders of a town that once buzzed with life but was ultimately swallowed by isolation and the collapse of industry. Kennecott was established in the early 1900s after prospectors discovered an astonishingly rich deposit of copper ore in the nearby mountains. The discovery was so significant that the mining operation quickly became one of the most lucrative in American history. With the backing of powerful investors, including J.P. Morgan, the Kennecott Copper Corporation was born, and by 1911, a massive mill and processing facility had been constructed. A 196-mile railroad was built to transport copper from the remote Alaskan wilderness to the port of Cordova, where it would then be shipped worldwide. At its peak, Kennecott was a bustling company town, home to more than 300 miners and their families. Workers lived in small houses perched on the mountainside, while managers and engineers enjoyed larger homes with stunning views of the valley below. The town had a hospital, a school, a general store, and even a recreation hall where residents could enjoy dances, movies, and community events. But life in Kennecott was harsh. The town's location, deep in the wilderness, meant that winters were brutal, with sub-zero temperatures and heavy snowfall making everyday survival a challenge. The work itself was dangerous and grueling. Miners spent long hours extracting ore from deep within the mountains, often in hazardous conditions. Despite these hardships, Kennecott thrived for 2 decades, producing millions of dollars worth of copper. But as with many boomtowns, the success was fleeting. By the late 1920s, the copper veins were nearly depleted, and production began to decline. The Great Depression further accelerated the town's downfall, as demand for copper plummeted. By 1938, the mines were no longer profitable, and the Kennecott Copper Corporation made a swift and shocking decision. They would shut down operations and abandon the town. The end came abruptly. Workers were given little warning before they were ordered to pack up and leave. Trains carried the last remaining residents away, and the once thriving town was left to the mercy of the elements. What makes Kennecott so eerie today is how suddenly it was deserted. Personal belongings were left behind, beds remained made, and the massive mill still contained machinery, as if the workers had simply stepped away for a break and never returned. Unlike other ghost towns that deteriorated over time, Kennecott's isolation has preserved it remarkably well. For decades, the town remained forgotten, slowly being reclaimed by nature. Snow piled up inside empty buildings, and bears occasionally wandered through the deserted streets. The railroad tracks rusted, and wooden structures sagged under the weight of time. It wasn't until the 1980s that adventurers and historians rediscovered Kennecott, intrigued by its haunting beauty and remarkable preservation. In 1998, the National Park Service acquired the site and began efforts to stabilize the decaying structures, ensuring that the town would remain frozen in time rather than collapse into ruin. Today, Kennecott stands as one of the most hauntingly beautiful ghost towns in America. Visitors who make the arduous journey to this remote location can explore the towering red mill building, which still dominates the landscape, its shattered windows staring out over the valley like hollow eyes. The town's hospital, general store, and houses remain eerily intact, their interiors filled with relics of the past. Old mining carts sit abandoned on rusting tracks, and the sound of the wind whistling through empty doorways is the only sign of movement. There is an undeniable ghostly presence in Kennecott. The sheer remoteness of the town, combined with its sudden abandonment, creates an atmosphere of eerie silence and frozen history. Some visitors claim to hear distant voices, the echoes of long-gone miners still lingering in the mountains. Others report a strange feeling of being watched, as if the town itself is reluctant to let go of its past. Whether haunted or simply steeped in history, Kennecott remains a chilling testament to the fleeting nature of fortune, a town built on riches but doomed by the very resource that made it great. Cahaba, Alabama. The ghost of Alabama's first capital. Deep in the heart of Alabama, hidden among towering trees and tangled vines, lies the abandoned town of Cahaba, a place where history and mystery intertwine. Once the bustling first capital of Alabama, Cahaba is now nothing more than a haunting collection of crumbling structures, forgotten graveyards, and eerie remnants of a once thriving community. The silence that fills its abandoned streets carries whispers of the past, and those who visit often report an unsettling feeling, as if the town itself is still alive, waiting for its people to return. Cahaba's story begins in 1819, when it was chosen as Alabama's first state capital. Situated at the confluence of the Cahaba and Alabama rivers, the location seemed ideal, offering fertile land, easy river access, and plenty of room for growth. Soon, elegant mansions, churches, and government buildings rose from the ground, and the town flourished. Wealthy plantation owners moved in, establishing large cotton plantations that fueled the economy. The streets were filled with politicians, merchants, and aristocrats, making Cahaba a center of southern prosperity. But this prosperity was short-lived. Cahaba's location, which had once seemed like an advantage, quickly became its downfall. The rivers that surrounded the town made it highly susceptible to flooding, and heavy rains would regularly transform the streets into muddy swamps. The constant dampness led to outbreaks of disease, including deadly waves of yellow fever and malaria. The unhealthy conditions made the town an unpleasant and dangerous place to live, and by 1826, just 7 years after being named the capital, the state legislature decided to move the government to Tuscaloosa, abandoning Cahaba as the political center of Alabama. Though it had lost its status as the capital, Cahaba did not die immediately. Instead, it reinvented itself as a major cotton trading hub. The town's location on the river made it an ideal port for transporting cotton, and by the mid-1800s, Cahaba was once again thriving. Grand mansions lined the streets, steamboats arrived daily, and the town became a place of wealth and culture. But fate had other plans. The Civil War brought devastation to Cahaba. The town's economy collapsed, and its prosperity faded. During the war, it was even used as the site of a Confederate prison, where thousands of Union soldiers were crammed into overcrowded and unsanitary conditions. Disease and malnutrition ran rampant, and though the prison was not known for extreme brutality, the suffering was immense. When the war ended, the prison was closed, and many former prisoners left behind stories of hardship and horror. In the years that followed, Cahaba struggled to recover. The final blow came in the late 19th century when the railroad bypassed the town in favor of nearby Selma. Without access to trade and transportation, businesses failed, residents moved away, and by the early 1900s, Cahaba was completely abandoned. Homes were left to decay, churches stood empty, and the once grand streets became overgrown with weeds and moss. Today, Cahaba is one of the eeriest ghost towns in America. Walking through its remains, visitors can still see crumbling foundations, iron fences enclosing forgotten graves, and the skeletal remains of old structures. The town's cemeteries are particularly haunting, filled with weathered tombstones and mausoleums that seem to whisper tales of those who once lived and died here. The old slave burial ground and the remnants of the prison site only add to the town's sorrowful past. Many believe that Cahaba is haunted. Reports of ghostly apparitions, flickering lights, and eerie voices have persisted for decades. One of the most famous legends is that of the floating orb, a mysterious glowing light said to appear near the old cemetery. Some say it is the spirit of a Confederate soldier forever wandering the abandoned town. Others report hearing the faint sounds of laughter and music, as if echoes of Cahaba's lively past refuse to fade away. Despite its abandonment, Cahaba has not been completely forgotten. Today it is preserved as a historic site, drawing visitors who are fascinated by its ghostly beauty and tragic history. Whether it is truly haunted or simply a place frozen in time, one thing is certain: Cahaba is a town that refuses to be erased, standing as a chilling reminder of how quickly fortunes can change and how even the most promising of places can be swallowed by the past.